And now I'm delighted to be joined from Washington by retired U.S. Ambassador John Limbert, a veteran diplomat, educator, and author whose love for Iranian culture has not diminished despite the 14 months in captivity that earned him the State Department's highest honor for distinguished service. Ambassador Limbert, welcome. Now, you spent a lot of time during the 60s and 70s in Iran. You're personally invested in the culture. You know the politics well. Can you briefly tell us about your connection to the country and whether you and your family had a sense of foreboding of what was to come later that year?
Well, they go. My connections go back over 50 years. I mean, I was there as a student, as a teacher, as a Peace Corps volunteer, a researcher, very briefly an on-the-street diplomat, and as a prisoner. But my probably strongest connection is a member of a very proud Iranian, very proud and cultured Iranian family. Mm-hmm. So I'm a son-in-law and a husband and a brother-in-law also. Those are probably my strongest connections.
And did you or your family have any sense of foreboding of what was to come when you made that decision to come back to Iran just 12 weeks before the embassy takeover?
Someone once asked me, they said, if you know so much, why did you go to Iran? Believe me, that's a question I've asked myself. Well, in some ways it was, I mean, once the American administration had made the decision to admit the ailing Shah, the ailing Shah in October, mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, we were pretty sure something was going to happen, and it wasn't going to be good. But speaking more generally, I mean, the political situation there was very fluid. It was mm-hmm. very unstable, and it could have gone in many directions. And it was by no means certain that it would go in the very negative direction that it did.
Well, take us back to the morning of November 4th. And at one point, did you realize this was not a normal run-of-the-mill student demonstration? And even more importantly, at what point did you realize that you and your colleagues were on your own?
It took a while. I mean, this was the late 70s, so it was the period of student demonstrations, right. and sit-ins. And from all I understand, that was pretty much the intention of the students from the occupiers from the beginning. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was problems from the beginning. I called the foreign ministry. I called the prime minister's office, and the only response they had was to ask when their American visas would be ready.
Unbelievable.
I mean, they wanted to get out too. They wanted to get out too, and it was clear they were not going to be able to do anything. But I mean, once they had captured us after a couple of hours, in a sense, now they had the problem. Sure, we had a problem as mm-hmm. captives, but they had the bigger problem.
Because they never intended.
What were they going to do?
Because they never intended to keep you so long. Correct? It was an improvised operation.
It was improvised from start to finish, but that's what they claimed. But some very clever people figured they could make use of this, not necessarily against us, but against their own internal political rivals. I mean, there were scores to settle with other Iranians, and we became the perfect weapon.
Now, were you aware of all the major events that transpired during your captivity? The botched Desert One rescue, the death of the Shah, the start of the, were you even aware of what was happening around you, and how did that affect your treatment?
Well, our captors did their best to cut us off from news. Mm-hmm. We had no access to radio, television, newspapers, other things. You know, the little bit of mail that we got was censored.
Yes.
But we fought back and were able to find out things through surreptitious means, smuggled radios, smuggled smuggled newspapers, messages passed around among ourselves. So we did find out about find out that there had been a rescue attempt that had tragically tragically failed. We knew about the aborted UN mission in February, March of 1980, and we had a more or less sense of what was going on out there, but we had no idea of how enormous a story we were, and how the whole incident had just grabbed had just taken all the air out of the room,
absolutely,
everywhere, particularly in U.S. politics.